Well, good morning, everyone. Hope everybody had a great week last week. I know I did. We were in Disney for the week, and I was tracking my steps. I think we averaged about 15 to 20,000 steps a day. So we were walking anywhere from 7 to 8 miles a day. So it was amazing. Great time. Got back okay, but looking forward to seeing what the Lord has for us today. So again, I hope you guys had a great week. I want to update us a little bit on our missionaries. Don't forget to keep praying for our missionaries. They are in the ones that we have in India. Continue to pray for them. They're actually going into, I think, lockdown again due to some of the COVID stuff. So those who are operating businesses and those who are, they're kind of being restricted in operating. So continue to pray for those guys there. Everybody's doing well. Everything continues to grow, but just continue to pray for them there. As well as Ken and Jen in Wales, as well as Pastor Joey in Cuba. Just to let you know, we were talking about in December, about being able to send some resources down there, and they needed some money to ship things. And so we actually were able to give them like $600, and they received a bunch of medicine, clothes, shoes, and a couple of other things. It actually arrived right on Christmas, so it was a kind of great timing. So you guys just should be, I just want to update you on that and just be honored that we're a part of what's going on in Cuba, even though we're not there. So we're still able to get resources there. As a little more on Cuba is that hopefully sometime this year we'll be able to go back and get in and fly in. I know some folks have been traveling in there from Pennsylvania and Texas, and so as things continue to relax a little bit on the travel things, I hope to get us back there this year. So put that in your calendar. When I say put it in your calendar, just put it in your thought process so the Lord can open your calendar up when the time comes. All right, so this week's the last week on faith. I'm operating. First of the year, I said I wanted to do some messages on faith, some on hope, and some on love, because I want to continue to encourage our foundation, continue to maybe strengthen it, remind us. In the very first message, I talked about us pairing up with one other person. So beyond your spouse, if you have a spouse or if you have a good friend, I even heard testimony of somebody partnering up with another businessman in the community, and they just pray for one another. They committed to get together like once every couple of weeks. So it makes it reasonable. So I just want to bring that back to us and say, hey, don't forget to be together and even have a friend or spouse or whoever, and just agree on something and begin to pray towards something. Because God says in Hebrews 11:6, without faith, it's impossible to please Him. But He goes on further, and He says, but he who comes to God must believe that He is, and that He's a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. And I think, especially in this time in our world history, ever since maybe the pandemic began and everything just shifted. If you can think back before the pandemic or before all that began, and think about how you were living your life and what was going on in your life and how you were seeing things and how you were viewing things. This literally has changed how people maybe see God or see that He's faithful. And so I don't want us to lose our sight. I don't want us to lose our way. I want us to continue to walk in faith. I want us to continue to have hope, because all of this is not faith in God and hope in who He is and the love that I extend to others and how He loves me is not predicated on my circumstances. It's not tied to if I'm getting my prayers answered or not getting my prayers answered. And so I think that's really, as we do this, maybe this third week on faith, we could go for the rest of eternity and talk about faith. But out of this third week, I want to get a little more practical with this message. So let me remind you, faith is the conviction of what is true. So faith is convinced of a truth, and it continues to look at that truth even when it doesn't see the truth. Faith looks into the unseen world, or what you can't see, and it pulls it into the scene. And we would like for our faith, a prayer of faith, to change something, a prayer of faith for us to change a circumstance. We'd like that to be immediate. Remember, we read the last 2 weeks, we were faith of the centurion. He came to Jesus and he pulled on Jesus' authority. And the Syrophoenician woman said, I don't even need the bread from table. I would just like the crumbs from underneath. And so he grabs, so we kind of want that to be our experience. But listen, every day we get up and we're faced with different circumstances. We're faced with different things in the world. Does that change how I see who the Father is and how I see what the work of Jesus has done? And as I view the Holy Spirit and as He's working within me, does that change me? Because we have to be so anchored and rooted here that there's not circumstances, there's nothing that can shake our foundation. Nothing. And so I want to continue to encourage us to look at our faith and see what pulls on our faith. But today we're going to be in Hebrews chapter 11. And we're going to start in 23 and we're going to go through about 29. And this is Moses, and I want to kind of pull this apart. And then I also want to go back to, I'm going to jump back in the Old Testament for a second on Joseph. So remember, faith is the conviction of what is true. It's the conviction. So we're convicted of what's true. And a lot of times it's attached, that conviction is attached to maybe what we see. It's attached to, when I say what we see, it could be a dream. It could be even a testimony. It can be attached to what we read in the Word, and our faith gets attached to it, and we hold on to it, and we don't let it go. It keeps pulling us forward. And I think when we have faith, we have to be able to see into the unseen and see past, because those things pull us into the future. They pull us forward in our faith and our walk. When we first walked into our house that we own right now, presently on Fireside Court, when we first looked at it to purchase it, we walked in, and my wife said, I immediately see what we need to do here, and I see everything. I see where the walls need to be moved. I see the flooring. I see the kitchen. I see how things need to be. And she said, I see it. And I'm looking at it going, all I see is closed-in spaces, commercial carpet, wallpaper. I just see a 1993 house that's never been touched. And so with that, what she saw, she saw it, and it wasn't present in the natural, but she could see it in her mind's eye. And so that's what pulled us through. So let's start here in Hebrews chapter 11. Verse 23, we're going to talk about Moses here, and we're going to kind of look through his story. If you read through the Hebrews chapter 11, it's the faith chapter. And if you'll read through it, it just outlays a lot of stories of faith where people operate in faith, and as they operate in faith, things began to move. And so let's read the story of Moses, and let's kind of get another picture of faith here. Verse 23 says, by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that he was a beautiful child and they were not afraid of the king's command. Now the king had given that, if you go back to Exodus chapter 1 and 2, there had been Pharaoh, the king, had come out and said, look, midwives, if a child comes out, a Hebrew child's born and it comes out female, allow it to live. If it's male, get rid of it. Say it didn't make it. And so move it. And so that's what they said that to them. And so what happened there was the midwives said no. Like, we fear God more than we fear Pharaoh. And so they allowed the male children to live. And so they began, Pharaoh was frustrated by that. And by faith, they actually said, no, we believe, we know who our God is. And we will not be, even though in the natural we have this we're being ruled over by this person, we're not going to change what we believe. And so they, against Pharaoh, allowed these male children to come into the world because Pharaoh was trying to control the population of Israel. So you see this, and you see by faith these midwives actually allowed Moses to come into the world. And then you see in 23 it says, when he was born, he was hidden for 3 months by his parents. So his parents said, okay, we're not going to destroy him. We're going to hide him. But then, because they saw he was beautiful and they didn't allow fear to move them. Now, when we all begin to move in faith, there is this fear that comes in. What if? What if this doesn't happen the way I think it should? What if I pray for somebody and it doesn't happen? What does that say? You know, here, if you look at that Greek word, it's phobeo, which is kind of like a phobia, to be afraid. And so your fear can begin to direct our decisions, the fear of the unknown, and we won't actually engage. Now, all of you know that I'm not a rider of rides with Disney. I get motion sickness pretty easy. And but I was sitting around Sunday thinking before our trip on Monday or Tuesday, and I was just sitting thinking, going like, I really want to, like if you've ever been car sick or if you've ever been seasick, you know that like, it's like it just stays with you. You're nauseous. It's a terrible feeling. I've been offshore before and having to wait to get back in, to get off the boat, to go home, to take a shower, to lay down, to sleep it off, to wake up the next morning. Terrible feeling. And I'm the same way when I ride rides, especially these virtual rides. And so when you get on these different ones like Avatar, or which they put you in this seat, and then you're riding this creature, and you're jumping off cliffs, and you're going and skimming across the water, and then you're going through waves. It's like you're doing crazy stuff and that you really shouldn't be doing. And that experience is messing with your head. Well, Sunday before we left, I was thinking, gosh, I really want to experience this with my kids and with the families and the friends that went with us. I'm going like, okay, I really want to experience this. So I started Googling around, and I got this band that actually fits on your wrist, and it sends an electric pulse, and it to your stomach, but into your brain, because there's a nerve that sits there, and it like takes the nauseousness away. And so listen, this is by faith, because listen, the fear of riding these rides, I'm sitting here going like, I don't want to ride these rides and feel it, because I know how I will feel when I come off of them. I'm going like, I don't want to miss it. And so it's pushing me to look for another alternative. And I'm going like, but I know how I feel. Like, I'm 54 years old. I've had some terrible experiences with it. So I know how it makes me feel, but I'm going to search. Like, this is the desire for me to be present and do things. I'm going to push into it. And so I found this thing, and it wasn't that cheap, but I purchased it. And so I get down there, and so, okay, I'm going to do this thing. Like, I'm going to get on these rides, and I'm not going to back off. I'm not going to have any fear. And listen, I did it. And I rode every ride that I wanted to ride that usually makes me nauseous and motion sick, and I did not get sick. I enjoyed the rides. So it's the fear of what's happened in the past and our experiences as we continue to move by faith. And you go, Mark, that's not really moving by faith. I'm going like, well, in my life it's moving by faith, because I know how I feel when I get in those circumstances. I know how my body feels. I know how it just like it takes me for the day. And so I had to have faith that this thing that I purchased would actually work based on what people said. And I put it on and used it, and it actually worked. Later, some of you might want to come up to me and find me, and I'll tell you what that was. But that's what's happening here. The faith of Moses, his parents, gave him the ability to live and come into the world. Verse 24, by faith Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called a son of Pharaoh's daughter. So again, by faith Moses said, hey, I see something different. And when he was 40, they're talking about when he was 40 years old, and he had realized that he was a Hebrew and he was not Egyptian, and that he saw his people under such bondage, and they were slaves, that he wanted to do something different about it. And so he said, I'm denying the fact that I was adopted into this kingdom. I have all access to everything, but therefore I'm not going to take the access to this stuff. And by faith, I'm going to deny it, and I'm going to go with my people. And even today, we have to think about that when you're moving in faith today in your personal life. There are going to be choices like that where you go like, man, if I go by faith here, I could lose this, or I could be rejected here, or they could talk about me this way here. But what will I miss, or what will I miss seeing happen if I don't move in my faith? Verse 25, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. Verse 26, esteeming the reproach of Christ as greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he looked to the reward. Now hold your finger right there if you're in your Bible. If you're in your phone, just you can slide over to Romans chapter 8. Because it says right here, by faith he was esteeming the reproach of Christ, basically the suffering or the reviling of Christ as greater. So in other words, he's saying, it's much greater for me to have to suffer right now and to be a part of this, because I know if I continue to move in faith, there is a reward. I'm looking towards something that has a greater reward attached to it. And literally it means he literally looked away at something towards something that had future benefit for him. Go to Romans 8. The writer of Romans, of Paul, the writer of Romans 8, and he goes down verse 18. He says, for I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. The glory that's within us can only be revealed through faith. Only by faith in our lives, faith in seeing what's in the unseen and believing that in the unseen is the greater reality than our seen world. The only way to appropriate that is through faith. That's what all these stories are that tell us that through faith, the Roman soldier, by faith, said, Jesus, don't even come to my house, but I recognize that there's something in you. By faith, you just speak the word. And so that's where our faith has to continue. We can't look at this and go like, I don't want to suffer, I don't want to risk, or I don't want to be looked at a particular way, so therefore I'm not really going to engage my faith. I'm not going to engage what I believe to be true. I'm going to shy away from it. I would never have experienced, as nominal as it is, okay, Mark, those are just rides at Disney. But as nominal as they are, the experience that I have with my family and the ability for me to actually try something that could lead to failure, that's the risk we take, but it's the benefit that we gain. And he's looking at this reward that's out there ahead of him. There's a reward that's here for us, and there's a glory within us that only gets revealed through faith. There's no other way for that glory to be revealed except through faith. Now, verse 27, he goes on, it says, by faith, he, talking about Moses, forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king. And this is the key part of the verse that I really kind of need to hone into, because it kind of encapsulates faith. It says, for he endured as seeing him, talking about seeing God, who is invisible. So how did he work his way through the fact that he was going to forsake all of Egypt? How was he going to? He was going to come up against the whole Egyptian empire, and he's going to come up against it. And the only way he endured through that, through all the trials and through everything that he came up against, every fear, every insecurity, it was only that he endured as seeing him, talking about God who is invisible. So by seeing him, by looking and seeing beyond what the known world is, He had this experience at the burning bush in chapter 3, of Exodus. And when he had this experience in chapter 3, he saw the bush burn. He heard the voice come out of the bush. And he grabbed onto that and said, okay, I can walk with that. But then you walk through his life and you see where he's been fearful and where he makes bad decisions. And so you can see that each step of faith always brings an opportunity of greater faith. I think in our personal lives, really what I want to encourage us, especially this time of our world and what's going on, since March of 2020, how so many people have walked away from their faith, or they've become so inactive in their faith, or just kind of despondent or apathetic, because they're kind of like, is this really real? Like, is Jesus really real? Like, if we're going through this in our world, can God be really real? And so you begin to hear conversations like this, and I just want to reiterate this to us, is that it's only by faith that we can endure this, by seeing God, who's invisible. We have to be able to see with our unseen eyes. Verse 28, by faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest he who destroyed the firstborn should touch them. And now the context here is, by faith, at the very end of all the 10 plagues, God said, now I want you to kill a sheep. I want you to kill a lamb, a yearling, a firstborn, something that's good for offering without blemish. I want you to kill it. I want you to put the blood of that as a sacrifice, and I want you to put it on the end of a hyssop stick, and I want you to put it on the corner of your doorpost and above the doors, and I want you to put it on there so that will mark you, so that whenever I come through the land to take the firstborn, like I said I was, because of the disobedience of Pharaoh, that you will be protected. Now that could come across as like, okay, like, God, are you really saying that? Like, are we really going to go paint? And at this point, all of Israel, is in captivity under Pharaoh, and at this point, it's only by faith you go like, okay, we'll do this. I mean, can you imagine if you decided, I don't believe that, and I'm not covering it? And you can hear the crying and the wailing throughout the land. And you can hear it in the night, because they're in these mud and probably concrete type huts and buildings. And all you can hear the echoes of the horror as the firstborn of all the Egyptians is taken. And the peace is among the Hebrew people, because they have actually secured the doorpost with blood. And so by faith they did that, because it seems to be an odd thing to do. Verse 29 says, by faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land, whereas the Egyptians attempting to do so were drowned. This last part of the story is Moses leads Israel out of Egypt. They come to the Red Sea, and he puts the staff in the sea, and it parts, and they cross. An odd thing to put a staff in the water, except for the fact that the obedience of Moses opened the water up. And by faith, he did it. And by faith, they crossed. Like, you had to have faith, probably motivated by the fact that you had this oncoming army coming. So we're probably motivated by that a little bit, but by faith, you're going like, I got to go. I got to go crossed. And so I think partially what I wanted to continue to think about in faith, is that faith, when we're convicted of what's true, we, like Moses says, back in verse 27, or the writer says, it says that Moses, endured as seeing him who is invisible. And he endured by seeing past all the natural things to a future place, and to a God, and to a salvation that would happen that he can't see in the present moment. That's how he endured. And so for us today, I want us to be encouraged in our circumstances, be encouraged in our faith. I want us to Even come together with your one person and continue to press forward and find that God is faithful, even whenever our circumstances do not change and when our prayers don't appear to be answered. I think the most dangerous thing is that we create an image of who God is based on how He has answered our prayers and He's actually even operated in our life, as opposed to going to the Scriptures and letting that define who He is, and letting it to begin to define. Because then when we pray, we don't pray through our circumstances or pray through the fact that He hasn't met the things that I want, but we pray through the fact of actually who He is, and we see Him, and we can see Him in that. I'm going to close with this verse right here. James 1:17 says, every good gift, every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of turning. Meaning, in Him there is no shadow. There's nothing that's not light, and He's good and He's faithful. I started this message off by saying that when we first walked into our house, my wife looked in and said, I see everything. And I couldn't see everything. But I said, okay, I know she can see. And I trust her. So she held on to that vision. And as we went forward piece by piece, she would just instruct me, hey, Mark, we need to do this. Let's think about doing this. And how about this? And so she was seeing something, and then she was relaying it to me, and I would begin to help that picture come forth. But by faith, I wasn't seeing everything. I could kind of see everything, but she saw everything. And by faith, she continued to follow it. Just as for Joseph, back in Genesis, he had a dream, and then that dream pulled him all the way through his circumstances. See, by faith, she saw beyond what was in the natural. Sometimes if we can't see beyond what's in the natural, we'll always be stuck, hopeless. She saw, and she executed, and she relayed the message. And so now we have it's exactly what she saw, and we were able to execute it because by faith, she saw it, and we stayed with it. And she communicated to me about it, and so I was able to help bring that to fruition for us, and all the others that helped on us. So it all is attached to that one part of that verse in Hebrews, where he says, that last part where he says, He endured by seeing Him who was invisible. And so we need to be able to see into the unseen. So please, as we continue to cultivate our faith and walk in faith, as we're joining together and pressing into our circumstances, and we're pressing into things that we want to change, let us also have the right picture of our Father who's good, who has good gifts, who brings good things from heaven for us. And let us have the idea that we're looking beyond our natural, we're looking into the unseen to pull that into the reality today. So right now, I just ask you in your gather groups right now, or if you're watching this by yourself, is to process by faith, how do I see who God is? And by faith, how do I appropriate that? And by faith, do I need to change my picture that I do see? Maybe I see Him wrongly. And so maybe talk about how you see God, who He is, and maybe share some ideas that you practically every day can wake up in faith and go, I'm not seeing God, I'm not seeing my faith based on my circumstances or based on what's not been answered in my prayers, but I'm seeing Him as good, and I'm seeing through things. I'm enduring as the one who has seen into the unseen. Have a great week. Next week we're going to be on hope. Talk to you then.
lives.